As a lifelong reader and also Star Trek fan, I love reading those mass-produced Star Trek novels from like the 70s and 80s. A lot of the older ones are quite zany, they introduce really weird concepts, and I think all this reading has finally paid off because I'm pretty sure I officially found the worst one. Welcome to Blackfire by Sonni Cooper. According to the back of the book, there is sabotage aboard the Enterprise, and Spock's investigation leads him into defiance of the Federation and a bizarre alliance with the Romulan and Klingon empires against the bloodthirsty Tomarai, a savage race for whom war and battle are life itself. Now Spock has been declared a traitor and condemned to the shame of the Federation's highest security prison, and now Captain James Kirk must face the toughest decision of his command, while a lifelong friendship and the destiny of the free universe hang in the balance. And yeah, that's like kind of what this is about, but there's a bit of a twist. It loses the plot a bit, in the most literal way. I think the best way to experience this book, obviously, is chapter by chapter, but it's a terrible waste of your time to read it, so I'm going to tell you for you. Chapter 1. So we start off with an explosion on the bridge. Starting off with a bang. We like it. Scotty, of course, rushes up to the bridge to see what happened and, like, assess the damage. We also find out that there's apparently, like, a staircase. The turbo lift was useless, and the emergency repair crew was frantically working to clear the debris away from the stairway to the bridge. Did not know there was a stairway. Like, it kind of makes sense, because, like, the turbo lift would be broken. But, like, where do you think the stairs are? The biggest problem that people always talk about the original series, like, ship, is that there is one entrance and one exit. So, like, the staircase is intriguing, but, like, ultimately, we, of course, find the bodies of, like, our main 5 bridge crew, Sulu, Uhura, Chekhov, Kirk, and Spock, alive. There were a bunch of, like, cadets for some sort of, like, Starfleet Academy training program who were, like, shadowing, and they're all dead. And we don't really know if any of the other Enterprise crew was, like, on there and died. They don't really care about the people who died. But our guys are safe and immediately taken into surgery. Benga, of course, works on Spock, and McCoy works on Kirk. We don't know who works on the other 3 because they're important enough to be alive, but they're not that important. They're not Spock. While McCoy, quote, continued diligently repairing the body of the man he both admired and loved, Scotty's assessing the damage and is like, we gotta jettison, like, half the ship. It's too compromised. So they're, like, evacuating that half of the ship, but they can't evacuate medbay because people are dying, namely Kirk, and apparently people line up to give him blood. And immediately after the surgery that McCoy is doing on Kirk, that apparently takes like hours, he goes to his quarters and weeps. If you want to get like a feel for the pacing of this book, we see McCoy go to his quarters after an hours-long surgery in the same paragraph that we ever learn about this hours-long surgery. It's great writing. And to get another taste for just the writing quality of this book, in the very next paragraph, McCoy's buzzer rings, like, to his quarters, and in comes Dr. Jonah Levine, and Dr. Jonah Levine, a named character, is like, we're gonna be roommates. And McCoy's like, that can't be possible, I haven't had a roommate in years. And Dr. Jonah Levine is just kind of like, well, I mean, they're jettisoning half the ship, so I think we kind of all have to make sacrifices. And then immediately, like, again, 2 paragraphs after McCoy just left medbay, he gets called back up to medbay. And I bet you're thinking, clearly there's a reason he went back to his quarters. Like, he had to meet Dr. Jonah Levine. Dr. Jonah Levine, the named character, Dr. Jonah Levine, surely has, like, some importance on the rest of this book. Or at least we get to see, like, roommate antics between McCoy having to navigate being roommates with someone after years of not being roommates with someone. And you'd be wrong. It was a good thought, but it's wrong. We never see Dr. Jonah Levine again. We don't get any roommate antics, which I think is a shame. I think that'd be a great side plot for a Star Trek novel. Feel free to take that one. Write your own Star Trek novel. Give McCoy a roommate. Name him Dr. Jonah Levine. Also, the last line of the segment of the book where we are focusing on the roommate, which was maybe like 5 paragraphs, maybe I'm blowing this out of proportion, but the end of the sentence reads, leaving young Dr. Levine to sort out the problem of room assignments. And I just don't think there was a problem there. Half the ship was jettisoned. Like, why are you expecting to have your own quarters? When I was looking into, like, working on cruises, like, I was like, I don't think I could ever do it, because I could never, like, share a room with someone. So it's not that I'm, like, not sympathetic. Like, I get it. But also half the ship just fucking exploded. You know what I mean? Also, I kind of can have roommates. I went to college. I had to share a dorm. I just don't want to do it. Anyway, McCoy goes back up to medbay to see Spock, who called him, because Spock wants to see Scotty, and so they called McCoy. And of course, McCoy does the whole Spock McCoy song and dance where he's like, you can't see Scotty. You just had major surgery, and we couldn't even get all the metal out of your back. He had metal shrapnel in his back. I don't know if I mentioned that. It kind of matters. That does matter. A lot of things in this book don't matter, and I'm going to tell you anyway, but that does matter. Regardless, because, like, you can't do that. You need a rest. So you can, like, build up strength for your second surgery where we actually take all the metal out of your body. And Spock's like, that's ridiculous. Just, like, let me see Scotty. And McCoy's like, okay. When Scotty arrives, the really important thing that Spock had to tell him was that he thinks that the explosion on the bridge was sabotage. Which, yeah, I don't think it's supposed to do that. I guess it's because Scotty's, like, in charge of the ship, since both Kirk and Spock are down. So, like, I guess it was relevant. I don't know that it was, like, wildly urgent. I guess it was. I'll give him that. I'm being overly critical. After Scotty leaves, we get introduced to Nurse Kathy White. In her own words, I'm one of the cadets from the academy assigned to the training session. I think I mentioned the cadets before, but there's, like, cadets from Starfleet who are on the ship. And, like, at least 3 of them exploded, maybe more. I don't know. We don't really get a death count. And if you were thinking that I was introducing you to Nurse Kathy White because she's gonna be, like, relevant, like, oh, maybe she's like a red herring, maybe she's the one who, like, exploded the ship, you're wrong. She has a name, she is introduced, she introduces herself thoroughly, and she doesn't matter ever again. There's a common theme in this book. Things happening and just, like, not mattering, people being introduced by name and not mattering. It's a great book. To gain more insight about the sabotage, Spock mind melds with Sulu to figure out what happened on the bridge, like, in the moments before the explosion. Despite the fact that, like, Spock was there, I don't know if he, like, can't, like, meditate and get it himself, or if he, like, just simply wasn't paying attention. Maybe he was sleeping on the job. I do that. But according to Sulu's memories, a yeoman came in a little bit before the explosion happened and handed Kirk a pad and then just left without waiting for him to sign it. And so they're like, that was the bomb, it's the pad. Do they call it pads? I think it's what they call them, but like the little clipboard. The clipboard. And also we learned that Sulu's cadet was named John Reel. He doesn't matter. But it makes, I guess, more sense that we know his name. It wasn't like John Reel coming into the room and introducing himself. It was like, oh, my guy died. The guy who was shadowing me, he's dead and he had a name. Like, that I get. I don't get Kathy White or Dr. Jonah Levine. But they will live forever in my heart. In a way. Then Spock, like, not done with this little venture that he's going on, despite... I'm not sure if I mentioned, but he still has metal in his back, and according to McCoy, if it moves any more than it has, it could paralyze or kill Spock, and so he shouldn't move. And that is important. I didn't tell you, but now I did. But Spock's not letting that piece of metal that could kill or paralyze him stop him from talking once again to Scotty and asking him to secure a ship once they get back to, like, whatever starbase or whatever they're going to for repairs. And I mean, presumably medical help. And Scotty's just like, yeah, no, I'll totally do that. You're not injured at all. You were just in surgery. That's a fine thing to do. And then Spock just, like, kind of quietly goes into the captain's room where he's still recovering after surgery because he's still doing really bad. And he, like, Vulcan heals him, which I don't think is a thing that they have. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember that in any Star Trek show or movie that I've watched. But McCoy, upon finding Kirk, like, a lot better than when he left him, says, Spock's been here, right? Yes, Doctor, how did you know? I've seen him do this before. There could be no other reason for so great an improvement so quickly. He may very well have made the difference in Jim's recovery. You have not seen him do this before. With Scotty having successfully secured a ship back to, like, the wreckage of the Enterprise that they, like, jettisoned, they, like, explore a bunch of, like, the yeoman's quarters, like, anyone who matches the description that Sulu gave of the, you get it. And they, in the room of someone named Isabel Tamari, find, like, a map that looks like a star chart, and also, like, space nair to, like, remove hair. And Spock's like, she's hairy as fuck. And Scotty's like, I know women who are hairy as fuck. I almost said scary. Women aren't scary. And Spock's like, no, she's freakishly hairy. And then with that evidence, the star chart and, like, the nair, which... Is that evidence? The court doesn't really care about this case that Spock makes about the saboteur and the evidence. So, That's chapter 1. So in chapter 2, Spock and Scotty steal a ship. Spock's been working more on like the paper star chart thing to like find somewhere that matches it. And he does. And he needs a ship. But he can't get a ship because he's like on medical leave or like medical orders to not do things. Like fly a ship. And so he and Scotty just steal one and they go to the planet indicated in the star chart. And on the planet, they find a bunch of Romulans, and they get kidnapped by the Romulans and put in the brig. And then once in the brig, the Klingons, like, infiltrate the Romulan ship. There's, like, 3 Romulans, 3 Klingons, and 2 people from the Federation. But out of about 6 of those aliens, only one really matters. Her name is Julina. Her name is Julina. Is she a captain? Commander Julina. It was the woman who caught Spock's attention. Taller than the average Romulan, she stood straight and confident. Her dark hair was tied back efficiently, giving her chiseled features prominence. While Spock was rarely susceptible to female beauty, Commander Julina's radiance elicited aesthetic appreciation. I'm sure Spock would say that. Anyway, with the Federation people kidnapped by the Romulans, who were kind of kidnapped by the Klingons, they're like, we should probably talk this out. And so they stop, like, kidnapping each other and sit around in, like, a little peace circle, kumbaya, whatever. And then all 8 of them get kidnapped by the Tamari. They're just sort of, like, thrown in a ship and then, like, taken off planet from the planet that they all found themselves on. I'm not sure if I said, but the 8 of them all arrived there together because they all had like big ship disaster explosions and all found the star chart that all led them there. Got it. But they get thrown in the brig of the Tamari ship. The Tamari are like super hairy aliens, hence the Nair. She had to fit in with the humans. She wasn't anti-feminist. I'm sorry, Isabel Tamari. Her name's not really Isabel. What's her name? Issa? Her name's Issa. That doesn't matter yet. Forget I said anything. But they're only feeding like meat to the prisoners, and Spock's like, I don't eat meat. I'm a vegetarian. And they're like, we only have meat. And Spock's like, I guess I'll starve. And I feel that. Not on like a vegetarian sense. I'm not vegetarian, but just like, I'd rather starve than eat something I don't like. I frequently did in my childhood. That's one of the best things about being an adult, is you don't have to like eat nasty shit. Like, but all that is to say that like Spock, who's already weakened because of like his back injury, which is still fairly fresh, he is now also weakened because he's like not eating. And he also isn't eating for like so much of this book. It's a bit worrying. Time in this book is super weird. Like you never know how much time we've spent on a task. So it seems like it takes like a long time to get to this other planet, which I think makes sense. But I feel like it doesn't usually in Star Trek take like a month to get somewhere. And I don't know that it did take a month here. It seems like a long time. He's weakened by the time he gets there. That's all that matters. And there they meet Isabel Tamari, which was like a pseudonym for Issa. I think her title is like Begum Issa. It's spelled with 2 capital I's, which is kind of fun. Issa's just kind of like, haha, I blew up your ship. And Spock's like, yeah, I know. Issa's kind of like, you're kind of hot. And Spock's like, what? So they take up all 8 of our prisoners. I lied, there's 7. 1 got shot on the planet because he tried to like shoot at the Tamari. So we have 7 prisoners, and they get divided up by like 3 different Tamari. So Issa takes Spock and Commander Julina, and then another guy, I think his name's Eob, takes Scotty and I think 2 Romulans. The other 2 Romulans, I don't remember. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that Spock and Julina are together, like on a little team, and Scotty is not with Spock at all. He's just kind of on his own, which I guess is better than third wheeling. I don't know if you picked up on it, but like, Spock and Julina are gonna fuck. They're not gonna fuck. It's not that exciting, but they're gonna like sleep together on the same pile of furs. It's very juicy. They also just have them like publicly strip once they like belong to like Issa and whoever. So Spock and Julina just have to like get undressed in front of a bunch of people. And that's just there. I have nothing to add. But also, like, all the, like, Tamari are, like, ogling, like, Spock. But then Spock and Julina are just, like, ogling each other. I guess that's fine. I'm not one to judge. After they've been divvied up, they have to, like, train with, like, spears and shit. And they don't really know why. But this training is making Spock a lot weaker. He's doing bad because of his back. And also, he's still not able to eat because the planet of Tamari is very resource poor and, like, it's very cold, and so, like, not a lot can grow, so they only have meat, which does beg the question of what is the meat eating? Because everybody can't be eating meat. Somebody has to eat something else, surely. But it doesn't matter. They only have meat, and Spock still won't eat meat. And Issa has, like, a talk with him where he's like, you gotta do better. And Spock's like, I'll totally do that. And Issa's like, you're kind of hot. And Spock's like, what? Julina also notices that Spock is doing very poorly. So she has to, like, share sleeping quarters with him. Like, they have to share a pile of furs on the floor and, like, huddle for warmth. And Julina's like, what's hurting you? And Spock's like, nothing. I'm fine. And Julina's like, no, I can sense your pain. And she does, like, some mind meld thing to, like, take on some of Spock's pain. It's not like the Vulcan healing thing he did with Kirk. It just, like, alleviates his pain. It's like mind ibuprofen. Scotty, of course, also has to, like, do training, but he and Eob are, like, engineer buddies, so he sort of befriended Eob. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. It's also revealed that Issa has pierced Spock's ear because she's, like, obsessed with him. The jewelry he had been made to wear was chosen carefully, even to the earring in his right ear. He recalled the placement of the earring by Issa. It was then that he first experienced the full force of the restraining beam. That doesn't matter, don't worry about it. Which had held him immobile as she pierced his ear with a large owl and set this shimmering stone in place. Gross! All this training finally culminates in our three groups getting taken off planet to other planets and having to fight a bunch of people. Both Spock and Scotty realize that, like, the Tamari don't really help like each other. Like, when they fall in battle, they just, like, leave them to die. They don't, like, try to heal anybody. So because of that, the Tamari are, like, really weirded out when Scotty gets, like, shot with, like, a weird dart thing, and then one of the Romulans, like, does, like, surgery on him and, like, takes it out, and then Scotty's, like, ultimately fine. And, like, that's weird. Why would you do that? But also, Scotty then has, like, a dart that's, like, I don't know why I'm showing you my hand. I don't have it in my hand. But the dart is weird. It's, like, a weird material. Ultimately, I don't think it matters. It's made a big deal in the book, and it will come up again, but not for anything that matters. So I don't know why I'm telling you this. I don't know why. It told me, so I'm telling you. Spock and Julina have even worse luck. Spock just sort of, like, falls in battle. Like, his back gives out. And so, like, Julina does help him, too, as well. But, like, now everyone's, like, side-eyeing Issa for, like, even letting Julina bring Spock back, since he's, like, clearly sort of, like, failing at this whole fighting business. So now Issa is really protective of Spock. After they get back from the campaigns, are, like, surviving aliens, which I think are, like, 2 Klingons, and 2 Romulans, and 2 Federation. Oh, I think we all survived, right? Julina's alive. So no, 1 Romulan did die. We make an escape attempt, and they have to, like, climb up a ladder. Spock's back finally gives out. He's paralyzed from the waist down and falls off the ladder. Bit of a rough few moments there. Julina and Scotty refuse to leave Spock behind, of course, and so, like, the 2 Klingons and the Romulan blast off in their little spaceship, and Julina is, like, to the Romulan, please tell, like, Romulus, we're here. And he's like, yeah, I'll totally do that. Like, I'll super do that. Like, I'm totally gonna do. He doesn't do that. But now, like, Issa was already in a precarious position with Spock, and now she's in an even worse one, but still unwilling to kill him because she's, like, obsessed with him. So she just puts him in a cell alone and puts, like, food and water, like, just out of his reach, so he'd have to, like, stand to get to it, which is quite cruel. But she also allows the guards to, like, turn an eye when Julina comes in to give Spock, like, space dandelions to eat. While Julina is sneaking in, we have a thrilling conversation. Spock said firmly, Julina, you must do something for me. I've considered this very carefully. What I will ask of you will not be easy for you, but it is the logical and necessary thing to do. What would you have me do? I will not attempt an escape without you. It does not concern an escape attempt. I will help you in any way, you know that. Then bring me a way of ending my life. A weapon, poison, whatever you can obtain for this purpose. No, she tried to draw her hand away from his. I will not help you destroy yourself. Oh, I forgot to mention, they, like, professed their love to each other before they went into battle. Maybe that contextualizes this level of emotional intimacy, but I don't think anything really does. You must. I will explain my reasoning. Your Romulan teaching has equipped you to understand the necessity of my request. I am completely helpless, a deterrent to both your and Scott's survival. As long as I live, you will not try to escape. Therefore, the deterring factor must be eliminated. I am that factor. In my position, you also would choose death with dignity. I am slowly dying. Soon I will be unable to destroy myself. Each time you come and find me weaker, I believe you are permitted to come here to help prolong my suffering so that Issa may obtain a more perverse satisfaction from my situation. You would release your Romulan companions for such a fate? Would you condemn me to a lingering death to entertain an enemy, or will you permit me to die quickly, with dignity? It's like a joint suicide attempt. That's pretty fun. Juliana agrees, and the next day, which is to say 2 paragraphs later, brings him a dagger, and it is the dagger Issa customarily wore on her arm for ceremonies, which I didn't realize those were, like, sharp. I kind of thought it'd be, like, dull. Maybe I'm silly, though. So she gives him this bejeweled dagger to try and stab himself with, and, like, he can't do it because he's too weak, so he not only has requested this blade from Juliana, but also is like, you gotta kill me too, and Juliana's like, fine. He guided her hand, placing the dagger above his heart. Now, he commanded her. She added thrust to his, plunging the knife fiercely into his side, and immediately after that, she leaves, and the guard comes back to check on Spock, and sees that he has, like, a dagger wound, and so Issa gets super pissed and kills Juliana with a spear. This is chapter 2. Scotty, who is an engineer, not a doctor, has to try to figure out how to, like, stitch Spock together. And, like, I guess they have enough, like, first aid training in Starfleet that he does it successfully. But now Spock gets, like, his very own pile of furs in Issa's room. Scotty is allowed to, like, visit Spock as he recovers from Scotty's, I have to assume, amazing sewing job. I could not sew someone back from a dagger wound, I don't think. Scott's, like, very alarmed because Spock just seems uninterested in anything. Scotty apparently also, like, carves a chess set for Spock in an attempt to, like, bring some zest back to his life, which is quite sweet. But the only thing that piques Spock's interest is, like, the little dart that Scotty got shot with and then got pulled out by that Romulan. And I swear to God, the Romulan put it in his pocket, but now Scotty has it. So I'm probably wrong, but also the book might be wrong. And that's the end of chapter 2. Kind of a big one. We are now back with Kirk. Kirk has fully recovered and is excited to go see his best friends, Scotty and Spock, on his first day back on the Enterprise. And so he gets on the Enterprise, and we see him, like, sleep on the Enterprise immediately after getting onto it, so you think they would have had him beam on the next day. You'd think that's where the chapter would start, but no, we see him go to sleep. Of course, not before we meet a new yeoman named Yeoman Hellman. She is, like, mentioned again, so I'm not gonna say this one was, like, totally useless, but, like, she doesn't matter. It's better than Kathy White. Anyway, he gets all the way onto the bridge where he sees Uhura and Sulu and Chekhov, who are doing better, and he sees, like, some rando at, like, the science station, and then he calls down to engineering and is greeted by Lieutenant Commander Douglas. And Kirk's like, who the fuck are you? And he's like, I work here. And then there's, like, a guy who's like, I'm your first officer. So he calls to medbay and goes, McCoy, get up here! Because McCoy would know what's going on. McCoy does know what's going on. He thought it would just be, like, beneficial to, like, not tell the captain of the ship that, like, 2 of his crew members were, like, not going to be there, one of which being the first officer, the other one being the chief engineer. And I guess this was, like, a medical order, so just nobody told Kirk. And McCoy's like, I thought it'd be good for you. And it's like, that's, like, embarrassing if you're, like, the captain of the ship and it looks like you don't know who fucking works for you. So yeah, that's how Kirk learns that, like, his best friend is currently a fugitive from the law and sort of MIA. Like, I don't think they know that he's kidnapped. Anyway, our new crew are Lieutenant Commander Douglas in engineering. We have Lieutenant Commander Martin, who is the science officer. For first officer, we have Commander Leonidas, who is Greek, and they constantly mention that he's Greek. Good for Greece. I guess that still exists in, like, 200 years. Hooray! Commander Leonidas also has, like, worry beads that he, like, I don't know what worry beads are. I don't know what I'm motioning. But he has whatever worry beads are, and he just, like, clacks them throughout the day, and it, like, really pisses Kirk off, and he, like, snaps, like, totally at Leonidas in front of, like, everyone, and it's like, okay, you are a mess. Other thing that pisses Kirk off about Commander Leonidas is that he does, like, dance lessons in the rec room for, like, the crew when he's off duty, and Kirk's, like, being a grouch about it, but then, like, as he's, like, standing outside watching, he gets, like, thrust into the dance, and he's like, oh, this is pretty fun. So he's, like, a hater, but, like, he can't keep it up. And we don't really learn much about Martin, but we do learn a few things about Commander Douglas. Namely that he's, like, a little bit creepy. He had no real friend aboard the Enterprise yet. The first officer was too flamboyant. That feels tasteless, but okay. The science officer, too busy. The only person of interest he noticed was Yolanda Hellman. Do you remember her? She was the yeoman who had a name, and she gets mentioned again. Here's one of a few times she gets mentioned again. What an honor. Wonder what it's like to be the moody captain's yeoman, he thought. How close to him is she? He found himself a little jealous. Her job doesn't automatically imply a deeper relationship, but she is pretty and young and desirable. If I were the captain. ... And that's the end of the chapter. You're probably like, oh, that's pretty creepy. I bet that's like setting up some sort of like villain arc for Lieutenant Commander Douglas. And no, it doesn't matter. I guess it's just there. And also I lied, that's not the end of the chapter. The chapters are broken up into like sub-chapters. Like that's a chapter, and this is like the sub-chapter. I don't really get it, but like kind of a few of these are broken up like this. Anyway, Spock, of course, left Kirk, like, a message before he went off, and Kirk puts Martin on the search for, like, a second videotape thingy, floppy disk, whatever the fuck they had. And, like, there is a second one, and on that second one is a star chart. Kirk follows the star chart, and they find the Raven. Oh, that's the name of the ship Spock and Scotty stole. I don't think I ever said that. From the Raven, they find, like, a Tamari ship blasting off from the same planet. I guess they frequent this planet a lot. It's not really established what this planet is. But then they follow that ship to the planet of Tamari, which you have to get to by going through like a really narrow alleyway, is what I'll call it, between like two different suns or stars. It's like sort of complicated, and that does matter. It's very interesting to describe a book and have to separate out like what does matter and what totally doesn't. Chapter 4 is titled The Pet. Issa was beginning the evening task of bathing her interesting diversion, Spock. His passive resistance to her ministrations amused her. She found him a challenge. She basically just, like, bathes him and brushes his hair and treats him like a little doll, which is horrifying because he's paralyzed. He can't move. Also, he was kidnapped. There's a lot of, like, ethical issues, but I don't think we're ever supposed to be, like, rooting for Issa. Issa also brings him things because she knows he's, like, a scientist. He likes looking at things and learning about them. So she brings him little things and decorates his room, and Spock is not amused. He's not enjoying this. Can you imagine? Most importantly, on this day of the book, Issa brings him some flowers. Beautiful, Spock, but deadly. The seed pod and beans are poisonous. It's sad that such a lovely thing should be so lethal. Even a few beans can kill. But we can admire its beauty, can't we? Here, I will put it near you, so you may enjoy it. But at the same time, Spock asks Issa if he can see Scotty, and Issa's like, yeah, so Scotty comes for a visit. Spock's like, you gotta escape. Like, the Klingon and Romulans escaped, like, forever ago. Like, they're not coming back. Like, you need to escape. And Scotty's like, I'm not gonna leave you. And Spock's like, you totally have to. And Scotty's like, no. And Spock's like, okay, I accept your no. So just leave me here with my, like, pot of poisonous flowers, which have been on page put within my reach. And so, of course, immediately after Scotty leaves the room, Spock grabs the seed pods from the flowers and swallows them in his second suicide attempt in as many chapters. It's an interesting characterization of Spock, I think, to just see him, like, incessantly suicidal. At the same time, up on the Enterprise, they finally find, like, a Vulcan reading on the planet, which is Spock. But Martin, Sulu, Leonidas, and McCoy prepare to beam down. Scott literally hasn't even made it out of the building back to where he's been, which has just been making, like, alcohol out of dandelions and, like, hanging with Eob. But they immediately turn him around and send him back to Spock because Scotty saved his life last time, so presumably he can do it again. At which Scotty delivers the line, Spock try to kill himself? That doesn't make sense. This was not the first time. But I guess maybe they think Julina just tried to kill Spock for no reason? I don't know. Scotty immediately gives Vulcan mouth to mouth, which, I don't know, can you get poisoned if somebody eats poison and then you give them mouth to mouth? Like, I wouldn't risk it, but also, like, maybe I should be a bit more of a giving person. At, like, the exact same time, Kirk and Chekhov and Martin... Was Chekhov a part of this? No. Sulu, Leonidas, and McCoy No clue why Chekhov's there. But Kirk, Chekhov, and Martin are there, as well as McCoy. And McCoy, of course, saves Spock, and then they all just beam out of the Tamari compounds. On the planet, McCoy had, like, pumped Spock's stomach, but up in sickbay, McCoy is like, you're too weak right now for us to do the surgery that will let you use your legs again, so you have to, like, build up strength. Your muscles have atrophied, you haven't eaten in who knows what amount of time, because this book doesn't like to say. And if you heard the words that I said and said, wait, there's, like, a surgery that can reverse the paralysis, that was also my thought. I kind of thought McCoy had mentioned the paralysis because there's nothing you could do to undo it. Like, he could also die. So, like, I'm not saying he should have been like, walk, Spock, do whatever. But I was under the impression that it, like, wasn't a fixable paralysis, but it totally is. But once Spock built up enough strength, Leonidas is like, he's got to get to the brig. He's, like, a fugitive from, like, the Federation. And Kirk's like, nah, like, he's cool. Like, he's Spock. Like, we'll just confine him to quarters. And Spock's like, yeah, like, I'll totally, like, stay in my quarters. Don't worry. And Leonidas is, like, pissed. And, of course, Spock does not stay in his quarters. He leaves his quarters to send a message to, like, the Romulans about the Tamarian threat, because that's something he promised Julina. I don't remember when, because I don't really know when it ever looked like Spock was gonna be someone getting out, but... And, of course, they see that he sent this message, and Kirk's like, Spock, what the fuck? Like, you agreed with me that you would stay in your quarters, and Vulcans never lie. Famously, they've never done it. They've never lied. To which Spock responds, technically, no, Captain. I said confinement to my quarters was sufficient. It was, to serve my purpose. That's a lie. The Vulcans can lie. Vulcans do lie. I don't know why people keep, like, believing Vulcans. They're like, Vulcans don't lie. We don't lie, guys. Like, the Vulcans can't lie. So a Vulcan wouldn't be lying. They're lying to you all the time. They lied to you when they said they weren't gonna lie. They lied. Spock's a little fucking liar. He lies all the time. Am I starting, like, special prejudice against Vulcans by calling them massive fucking liars? They are massive fucking liars. If they didn't want to be pinned as massive fucking liars, maybe they shouldn't be massive fucking liars. Anyway, chapter 5 is called Court-Martial, which is a good sign, and it's because Spock and Scotty are getting court-martialed. I don't really know what a court-martial is. I don't know if it's, like, job-specific or it is, like, a criminal court. Scotty has a lawyer. Her name is Ellen Janice. Coy and Kirk are, like, pissed at Spock for, like, not having a lawyer. So you can imagine how furious they are when Spock also pleads guilty to stealing a ship, which, to be fair, he did steal a ship. So Spock gets, of course, declared guilty and sentenced to 5 years in what they call a rehabilitation center. We'll circle back around to that one. And then Scotty gets off as not guilty because he was technically like a subordinate. He was doing this under, like, bad commands. I'm just following orders was a good excuse, I guess. There's also a fun line, like, in the middle of the court session where they're, like, cross-examining McCoy. When you found Commander Spock, what was his condition? The sliver of metal embedded near his spine as a result of the explosion aboard the Enterprise had shifted, paralyzing him. He also was malnourished and anemic as a result of his confinement. Unable to act on behalf of Starfleet or himself, Doctor? Yes. Kirk envisioned a gag on McCoy in his frustration. I don't know if I've ever envisioned a gag on someone I wanted to shut up, but I like his style. I'm also not really sure why that was considered by Kirk to be, like, damning evidence. So, Spock is sentenced to 5 years at a Starfleet Correctional and Rehabilitation Center on Minos. Something about the Star Trek universe is they do not seem to have, like, achieved prison abolition, but they have achieved prison reform. We see this in Dagger of the Mind. We see this in Whom Gods Destroy. And, like, it's far from a perfect system. In Whom Gods Destroy, they talk about a medicine that will end all mental illness forever, that they send to a prison full of incorrigibles. And that seems problematic. That is highly worrying. But in Dagger of the Mind, Kirk talks about the, like, humanizing of prisoners and, like, the betterment of prisons. There's, like, this guy. Just watch the episode. I don't need to explain it to you. Why are you watching this video if you watched every Star Trek episode ever? But I think that shows, like, a spirit of, like, less leaning towards, like, retaliative justice and more towards, like, we'll say reformative justice. It's better than what exists, I think, now. I think there's room for improvement there. That being said, this quote-unquote rehabilitation center in Blackfire It's just like a prison from like Texas now. Like the kind where they're like, oh, they're just like burned to death in the summer because they don't have air conditioning. They don't burn to death in this one, but it is highly problematic. I made a 24-point list of all of my problems that I called future space prison complaints. I don't need to go through them one by one, but I suspect we'll figure them out together as we go through chapter 6. That was kind of misleading because, like, my first problem is in chapter 5, on the last page of chapter 5. Spock is asking Kirk not to tell Sarek that he's going to prison. I don't know if that's a thing they, like, keep under their hats in Starfleet. Like, they don't let people know, like, sorry, who's going to rehabilitation center, not prison. But Kirk promises not to contact Sarek, and Spock says, I do not ask you to understand my motives, but I do ask that you respect my decisions and actions. Okay. Accept the entire situation realistically. I did commit the offenses. Please, Jim. He tried to reassure his friend. I will be fine. But Kirk knew Spock. A rehabilitation center would be unendurable for him. And that is my first problem, because, like, why would a rehabilitation center ever be unendurable for someone? Like, I don't think that's a good sign. It's the type of thing that, like, oh, I would get it in, like, today, because it'd be like prison, but, like, rehabilitation center isn't supposed to be like prison. Future space prison isn't supposed to exist, but, like, more so, if it does still exist, certainly it shouldn't be unendurable. Surely we've humanized prisons, as Kirk said in the fucking episode. I don't know. I feel like any thoughts of prison reform that are in the original series fully went over this author's head. So let's get into Space Prison chapter, which is chapter 6. It immediately starts with Spock again having stripped down in front of a guard, which is, of course, on my list of space prison complaints. The guard is also yelling at him as he's stripping down, and Spock is, like, having trouble stripping down because he just got out of back surgery. Did I tell you he got out of back surgery? He can walk, but he's still, like, sore, and McCoy still has him wearing, like, a back brace. And so he's having a hard time stripping down in front of this guard. He's given a prison uniform to put on, which, of course, I take problem with. I think uniforms dehumanize people, and I don't think that's what you should be doing in future space prison. Rehabilitation center. My bad. Throughout the entire process of prison identification and the change of clothes, Spock remained expressionless. He remembered times aboard the Enterprise on those rare occasions when prisoners were being transferred, how he'd looked upon them with pity. Prison transfer had been the security section's responsibility, and he had only taken a mild interest. The process was acutely distasteful to him, but no one would have known. His face revealed absolutely nothing. So I'm not alone in this. Spock also thinks space prison should be better. As he gets to Minos, which is the planet that the rehabilitation center is on, he's given an ID number. The guard sneers at him and tells him to learn the number. That's who you are now, Commander Spock. I just told you I think prison uniforms are dehumanizing. You don't need me to tell you that I also think being referred to by, like, a number is also dehumanizing. I think you could just call him Spock. Dare I say it? Also, future space prison is, according to Spock, overcrowded. Spock noticed that Starfleet had not planned its penal system to accommodate the great numbers requiring it. Why are there great numbers requiring it? Is this not communist space future? Are we not preventing crime before it happens? Why are your prisons rehabilitation centers, why are they overcrowded? Also, I keep saying prison instead of rehabilitation center. But don't worry, the book also drops the rehabilitation center eventually and also just calls it prison. We have no facades about what is happening here. Spock gets, like, a meeting with, like, the warden, and the warden, like, sends the guard away and is like, let me and Spock talk. And we, the reader, also, like, aren't privy to, like, what happens in this little, like, warden meeting. After that, Spock gets escorted to, like, his quarters, which he has to share with 3 roommates. Spock's roomies come back. There is someone named Bull Tim Macklin, Harry Needham, and then there's a Romulan who has the top bunk across from Spock, and Spock's, like, really excited by Romulans, as shown by his interactions with Commander Julina. Tall and slim, with the distinctive pointed ear of the Vulcan strain, the man gracefully vaulted to his bunk and sat, legs dangling, facing Spock. The 2 men openly stared, appraising each other. And Spock makes a great introduction by saying, Spock. Like, he doesn't say, I'm Spock, my name is Spock. He just says Spock. I don't know that that's how you introduce yourself to people, but, like, also I'm not the most prolific at social interactions. So maybe that's a perfectly fine way to talk to someone. Just stare at them and say, Spock. And just in case you thought the book thought differently, no acknowledgement followed. So I think I was right about that. It's lights out, and suddenly Bull Tim Macklin gets out of his bed, which is the bunk underneath Spock's, and just throws him out of his bed. Suddenly the bunk convulsed again. Bull Macklin rose, towered above Spock's bunk, and grabbed the unprepared Vulcan by the arm, throwing him roughly off the bunk onto the hard concrete floor. Bull had raised his foot over Spock's head when a quick, strong hand pulled the huge man off his feet. So the Romulan, who Spock was just like staring at earlier, pulled Bull Macklin off of Spock to stop him from stomping on his head. Why did that happen? I finished reading the book. I don't know why it happened. And it happens like 2 more times. But now, the Romulan, whose name is Desis, to which Spock responds, Romulan? He really loves just a one-word sentence, I guess. Imagine if you walked up to me, said, I am Desis, instead of just saying Desis, and I just respond, human. Earthling. Freak. I don't know what happened to Spock's conversational skills, but I don't think they're at their peak. I mean, I guess he was just kidnapped. The next morning, Spock reports to the Labor Division, a worrying name for a division. So it's a new day, both in real life and in the book, and Spock has his first day of forced labor. I'm unclear on the ethics of this, because it's not like labor that's going to like provide goods and services to like anywhere else. It just seems to be like a farm for the rehabilitation center to sustain them. I don't love it, but it could be worse, I guess. Something that is bad is Spock has like an ethical problem with the fact that he has to like help raise the pigs that they slaughter to feed the other people. And so even while like Spock doesn't have to eat the meat, and I think they have vegetables, they should have vegetables, I don't know why they wouldn't have vegetables, he still like has ethical qualms with like even feeding these pigs, and that's just, he has no recourse for that. Kind of like how he has no recourse for the fact that somebody just beat him up in his bedroom last night. It was hard even for Spock not to react openly in dismay when he was told what his work would be. He was assigned to the care and feeding of the hogs. He had no objection to physical work, but raising animals for food was against all of his beliefs. For him to be a part of the process was particularly distasteful, but he made no complaint. There should definitely be a way that you don't have to do that. Again, I'm sure there's like a garden where they're growing vegetables. Why wouldn't that be like a question you ask upon entry? And also like a paragraph later, it says heavy work was needed to keep the prisoner population busy and in check. How are we still doing this like Puritan 1500s bullshit in space future prison? Anyway, while he's feeding the hogs, somebody trips him. He's receiving like high school levels of bullying in prison. And of course, dear Desis comes and helps Spock up from the slop. But then after Spock and Desis go to get more slop to replace the one that they just dropped, Bull Macklin is just standing in their way, so they can't dump it into like the pig's trough. And then, of course, Bull goes to charge Spock like an actual bull, I guess. And, like, Desis trips him, and they're like, oh my god, he looks so goofy. And according to the book, a minor victory, Desis warned, but he'll be back for more. Why do they have no way to, like, report this to anyone and be like, hey, can we not be in a room with him and also have to work with him because he's kind of being mean? Like, I'm sure they could sit in like a cafeteria together, but I feel like there should be some way for him to not at least be like sleeping in the same room with them. Kirk then comes to visit Spock in prison. Spock is like very cold and like won't talk to Kirk, and that like really hurts Kirk's feelings. Kirk's trying to talk to him about like getting him out, and Spock's like not hearing it, and Kirk notices Spock's bruise from everything that's happened with Bull Macklin, and Spock's like, it was an accident, like I tripped. And I was like, no you didn't. It's kind of a very sweet scene to see like their friendship again, but it's like not useful to the story. Like, it was kind of a waste of words as far as, like, writing a book goes. We then find out through a scene in the prison cafeteria that Spock still isn't eating. Like, he hasn't been eating this entire book. And, like, I'm, again, pretty sure they have vegetables, so I don't know why he wouldn't be eating. Like, I don't even... Is it just stubbornness at this point? Does he just want to see how far he can go? But Dessus notices it, and Spock says, I prefer to fast. Vulcans can go without food for extended periods. And that's his only explanation. We have another scene at night in the bedroom with Bull Macklin. That sounds kind of weird when I phrase it that way. We have another scene at night in the dormitories with Bull Macklin once again pulling Spock off of his bed to beat him up in the middle of the night for reasons we are never made privy to. But this time, in a surprising move, Bull suddenly backed away. There was hardly any time for Spock to react as Bull swiftly withdrew a knife from beneath his mattress. How did he get a knife? Dessus came up behind the angry giant, prepared to strike him, when Harry Needham, their other roommate, who hasn't been mentioned until now really, reached out and grabbed the Romulan's foot, sending him sprawling. They keep getting tripped. People keep getting tripped in this book. Spock and Dessus both get, like, slashed with this knife, and so they then have to go to medbay, naturally, and they have a discussion where Spock has decided that he wants to escape prison with Dessus. You slept long, the Romulan said. I was concerned. You saved my life last night, Dessus. I know you would have done no less for me, Spock. We are truly brothers in blood now. My favorite thing about Spock and Dessus is that, like, it feels like this book wanted, like, a replacement for the friendship that Spock has with Kirk, because they're, like, never together in this book. But it's so funny because, like, their friendship also just comes off as just, like, very... somewhere between, like, overly dependent and just, like, homosexual. You know? Yes, Spock agreed. There does seem to be a bond of sorts between us, forged by shared adversity. I think they've known each other for, like, a week. Spock looked over at the Romulan, realizing he had found a balance for his Vulcan side, just as Jim Kirk has been for my human half. He was somehow reassured, but also vaguely disturbed. These are emotions I should not be allowing myself to experience. They could detract from the successful realization of my plans. It's super exciting to hear that Spock has plans. And those plans are, of course, to escape prison. In a low murmur, Spock conferred with his new ally. I have no intention of staying here much longer, Dessus. I have every intention of leaving, and soon. Escape? I have given that prospect some thought myself, but I found no way, the Romulan whispered. And I've looked carefully, and I've had more time and opportunity than you have had. I have an advantage, Dessus. I know Starfleet procedures and codes. If I had an opportunity to get access to the computer, there would be no problem. And so, obviously that's what they do, but only after Spock eats a banana. Try this, Spock, the doctor said cheerfully. I think you'll find the fruit more to your liking than the usual prison fare. Which, I don't know, are they not offering them fruit? Does the prison also only offer meat? Because, like, the thing about Tamari is there was, like, a reason they only had meat. And the reason didn't really make sense, because if you don't have plants, you don't have anything for, like, the meat to eat other than other meat, and, like, eventually some meat has to not be eating meat, to my understanding of the world, which could be wrong. But this explanation, I think, makes even less sense. Like, surely they had, like, salad and apple tree on their little farm. Like, if the doctor has access to bananas, surely there's, like, a fruit bowl or something in the future space prison cafeteria. That night, after the banana eating, Spock and Dessus make their way, strangely easily, out of the medbay and to, like, a ship that isn't usually there. I believe it belongs to, like, the warden or something, and it's supposed to leave, like, in the morning. I suspect you've done this before, Spock commented. Many times, and it always works, Dessus said confidently. You have a lot to learn about being devious, Spock. And I apparently found a master to teach me. Putting his hand to Spock's shoulder and smiling wryly, Dessus replied, and I can tell that you and I are going to make a superlative team. But they, of course, hijack it and fly off into space to a pirate planet of space pirates on a planet. Space pirate planet. Pizza planet. Moving on to Chapter 7, we've made it to Space Pirate Planet, which is called Corsair. Immediately after arriving on the planet, Spock receives a note from someone called Captain Astro, which invites him to dinner. Spock asks Dessus who Captain Astro is, and he is Decius's rival. According to Decius, he is a very nasty fellow, a true renegade. Why do you ask? Spock makes his way to, like, the other side of town, I think, to Astro's, like, space pirate mansion. He immediately sees and names someone named Gert, a giant woman from Vega who shoveled whatever came her way into her mouth with noisy gusto. She has a name. Will she matter? I'll let you decide. Captain Astro asks Spock to team up with him because he wants all of Spock's, like, Federation information. Spock refuses because, of course, his alliances are with Decius. But once he gets back to Decius says that Spock, like, can't stay on Pirate Planet if he doesn't, like, do piratey things to prove his alliance to Pirate Planet, and he also can't leave because then he'd know where Pirate Planet is. So he can be a pirate or die. And so Spock chooses to be a pirate, and his first task is making an Excel spreadsheet to keep track of all of their loot, who it belongs to, and where it's kept. I love that Decius has been able to, like, really find the strengths of the people that he's hired to be pirates with. Are you hired to be a pirate? But if there's one thing I think from looking at Spock at his little computer station, I think he'd love an Excel spreadsheet. I'm glad he could have this opportunity. But while Spock is working on inventorying all of this loot into a spreadsheet, he finds something he takes a bit of interest in. 2 days later, while working on the inventory, Spock came across an intriguing item. In between the boxes of electronic parts, the cases of exotic liqueurs and drugs, and a cask of Denite glow gems, he came across a bolt of extraordinary fabric. I love that in this one instance, Star Trek finally lets Spock be the flamboyant theater gay that he was always supposed to be. Spock is so obsessed with his fabric. Its properties were unlike any he had previously encountered. Taking it into the light so he might examine it more closely, Spock found it had an amazing property of being able to absorb light. The fabric seemed to be a shimmering void except for its edges which fluoresced, outlining its contours with either black or red, depending upon the direction of the light source on the warp. Scooping up the bolt of fabric, Spock brought it to Decius. Spock asks Decius and, like, a bunch of the other pirates if anyone knows who got this cloth, where it came from. And nobody really has an answer, nobody remembers the fabric, and also nobody seems to care. Also, like, wrapped up with the fabric, there's, like, some, like, gemstones that the fabric seems to, like, be made out of because the stones have, like, the same light bending properties. After Spock can't find, like, the owner of the fabric, he tries to sell it, but still nobody's interested in it. And Spock's just been wearing, like, Decius's clothes the whole time because they're, like, the same height and weight and everything. So he gives this fabric to some seamstresses to make 2 exquisite outfits. Once the outfits were finished, he made a very striking appearance. The fabric with its light-absorbing qualities totally obscured the form within it, except for the edges, which rippled with a scintillating black luminescence, as if the edges were afire. The entire image was made even more dramatic by the addition of a cape, which shimmered around the obscured figure within. I always knew Spock was like a cape guy. And if you haven't figured it out by now, here's why the book is called Black Fire. Spock did not object to the name the pirates had tagged him with. Black fire was appropriate to the Vulcan, who seemed himself to burn with an inner intensity. Spock set aside his extraordinary outfit for a more suitable occasion, preferring to don a less flamboyant outfit for daily wear. I love that this book establishes that Spock wears this outfit enough for Black Fire to be his new pirate name, but also only for suitable occasions. I like to think he thinks a lot of occasions are suitable for, like, a really exquisite outfit that comes with a cape. Anyway, in the short few paragraphs immediately after all of those pages that dealt with Spock finding fabric and sewing an outfit, we learn that Decius and Astro, like, went out on a pirate mission together, and they took a ship, and Astro's like, I should have the ship, because you already have, like, a Federation ship that's exactly like this ship. And Decius is like, no, I should totally have this ship. And then Spock comes in, and he just says, it is impossible to divide a ship, gentlemen. You each must agree as to what is of more value to you. Decius solved the problem with action. Taking his phaser, set on kill, he pointed it at Astro's head. Relinquish the ship to me, or ... Astro paled. You win this time, Romulan. The ship is yours. This is a scene that, I guess to spoil it, does matter. It's just funny how much time is not dedicated to it compared to like Spock's fabric adventures. We get another scene of Spock grappling with his gay emotions towards a Romulan. Spock was relieved at Desis's safe return, but his attitude toward the Romulan confused him. Never one to enter into intimacy of any kind easily, he found himself becoming closer to the Romulan than he would have believed possible. This was a man he could respect, in spite of his outlaw profession. If he had a brother, Spock imagined he would be much like Desis, which tells you that this book definitely came out before the 5th Star Trek movie. And also, I wouldn't really say Sybok is much like Desis, but there's no way Sonni Cooper could have known that. Desis, on the other hand, has been thinking a lot on what to do with 2 identical ships, and so he approaches Spock with a plan. Do you still have those 2 outfits you had made from that extraordinary fabric? I'm glad that Desis agrees that the fabric is extraordinary. Curious, Spock nodded. Yes, but of what import is that? I have an idea which will make use of those outfits, and if I might boast a bit, a good one. Ever since we met, I have tried to find a place for you in my operation. It took my getting away for a short time to come to a conclusion. I think you'll find my idea an intriguing one. We now have 2 identical ships. I have ordered them both painted black with identical markings. Both will be renamed Blackfire, which will be emblazoned boldly in red on each hull. They will appear the same in every way. If you accept my proposition, one will be yours. Desis's good and intriguing plan is to have 2 ships, both called Blackfire, so I guess that's not like a name exclusive to Spock anymore. Like, I don't think Captain Astro has a ship named Captain Astro, but I could be wrong. But Desis also wants him and Spock to wear the matching outfits with like a hood pulled up, because they look really similar. That way they can pull off pirate plans that make it look like they have a ship that is like so fast it can be like in 2 places basically at the same time. And I agree. I think that's a good, intriguing plan. But Desis decides to test it by bringing in the person that he says knows him best, Raylos. This is of course the first time we're ever learning that Raylos exists. They bring in Raylos and they put on the outfits with the hood and just call Raylos into the room and like stand there like they're like mischievous twins. It was a very confused Raylos who encountered 2 men standing side by side, looking like a matched set. His hand went automatically to his chest, but he wasn't sure which of the men he should extend his hand in completion of the salute. Captain Desis, sir, he said stiffly, hoping one of them would speak and solve his problem. Laughing, Desis took down the cowl. Spock did the same, much to the relief of the confused Romulan pirate. A good joke, Raylos agreed. A clever plan, Desis, Spock acknowledged. I'm glad Spock agrees that the plan is clever. They really have that sort of synchronicity. Spock agrees to join Desis in this plan. Desis's ship is already named the Talon, and he asks Spock what he's going to name his ship. Spock names it the Equus with 2 U's. I don't think that matters, so I don't know why we know it, but pretty par for this book. The Blackfire plan is very successful. They are the new hot pirates on the block. They're getting everyone's attention, and Captain Astro gets jealous. Astro kidnaps 2 women who are just on a luxury, it seems like a space yacht essentially, so I guess those still exist, which is hideous. We have Galatia, the dark and lovely daughter of the ship's owner, and her cousin and companion Linnea. He kidnaps them to hold them for ransom so that this space yacht owner has to pay him money to get him back. That's what a ransom is. I don't know how I explained that to you. I think that's fine. I think if you can own a space yacht, you can pay money to have your daughter and her cousin brought back to you. Spock doesn't stand for this. He is a gentleman, I guess. And so he goes to Astro's to try and get him to release him, and Astro's like, no bitch, I'm about to get fucking paid. And Spock's like, yeah, by me. And so Spock pays their ransom and sets up travel for them to go back to their space yacht owning father and uncle. But of course, before they go, Desis sets up a dinner between Spock and these 2 girls because he thinks it's funny. It's one of those things that happens in Star Trek where it really sounds like somebody is deeply implying that Spock is gay by being like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if he had like dinner with like women? He would never do that. He's like such a misogynist and also homosexual. Like that episode where McCoy is just like, yeah, you wouldn't know that like weird theater girl's pretty because your chemistry prevents you from knowing that. Like, okay. That feels like an offensive way to call someone gay, McCoy, but like, I guess you can call someone gay in an offensive way if, like, you're clearly in a polycule with them. So at this dinner, Spock just, like, sits in his, like, full, like, cape and hood completely silently. Like, he doesn't speak to the girls, even when they ask him, like, questions. Spock has no appetite and just drinks a glass of water. And it's also revealed that those stones that came with the fabric that are, like, the same material, Spock made an earring out of them and is wearing it. So she can't see his face, but apparently she can see his ear because she asks him about it. And of course he doesn't respond. He just leaves the room because he's a misogynist and also gay. The next morning, though, Spock quickly gets them off the planet, which turns out to be a bad thing because we don't, again, get like a timeline at which this happens, but like within the same paragraph that Spock figures out how to get them off the planet, it's revealed that Galicia wrote a series of poems based on her adventure, which became bestsellers throughout the Federation planets. Decius, of course, thinks it's hilarious, and so he throws, like, a dinner party for Spock where they just, like, read out these, like, romantic poems that this girl wrote about him. And again, it seems like one of those moments where everyone is like, ha, Spock's so gay. There's, of course, one poem, and only one, in this book, but of course I'll read it. His dark shape flamed through the room, causing a skipped heartbeat as he bargained for possession of the women. Shrouded in a garment made of lightning, he took the ladies as his own, bringing delight clouded in mystery, to see his face through the veil of dark flame, to touch his hand, strong and warm, to belong to this man of fire, if only for a moment, time too short for love complete. He is a shadow of mystery, my flaming love. Unfortunately, the poetry in this book also isn't good, but luckily there's only one. I also think it's kind of unlucky because I would have loved more poems about Spock. We should really, like, integrate that into one of the shows or something. They keep having, like, musical episodes, but they should just have one that's just, like, a really long poem. An epic, all spoken in couplets. All of the other pirates, of course, love it and are asking for more. And Spock, although it was an embarrassment for Spock, even he saw the humor in the situation, and later in the evening rejoined the frolicking household. It was an evening to remember in the Romulan compound on Corsair. If you're wondering if, like, any of this poetry really matters, of course it doesn't. Can poetry not exist for poetry's sake? In the middle of a Star Trek novel? Like, Astro's, like, super pissed at Spock because now not just the black fire thing is popping off, but also, like, the poetry. So he just tries to stab him, which is what you always should do if you want, like, pirate attention. You should stab another pirate. I don't know. It doesn't succeed, so Astro goes to something that every pirate should totally do, and he rats Spock out to the Federation and, like, tells them where their next, like, pirate plan's gonna be. And so on their next pirate raid, they of course get stopped by the Enterprise. And when Kirk boards, Spock, like, falls, so, like, his hood falls off. And Kirk, of course, sees that it's Spock. He's like, Spock, what the fuck are you doing? You're a space pirate now? And Spock says, indeed. One of, like, the security people that Kirk beamed over with, like, shoots Spock to, like, stun him, not kill him. And at the same time, Kirk gets, like, a message from Leonidas back on the Enterprise that there's another ship coming this way, and it's the Blackfire, and the second Blackfire ship beams Spock off. But, like, none of the other pirates who are, like, doing this pirate raid with Spock on his ship, I guess they're just left to the mercy of the Federation. Which is probably fine, but also, like, Decius was in prison. I'd have more hope if we hadn't just seen all of the problems with the 23rd century prison system. Anyway, it's chapter 8, and we're going to Romulus. You're probably gonna ask, why are you going to Romulus? I don't know. They never really sufficiently explain it. Like, I think it's just that, like, Decius, like, abandoned his military duties for a bit to be a pirate, and Romulans are, like, kind of okay with that. Like, they don't really care. Spock says, I would have thought we'd not be welcome there. And Decius says, pirates that we are, but Romulans have different values. You will see. You have proven yourself to me, Spock, both as a friend and as a colleague. How would you like to serve the Romulan Empire? Of course, immediately after they, land on Romulan, Spock gets arrested because of that thing he did back in the Enterprise incident in season 3. Yeah, they didn't forget about that. He still has, a death sentence he's supposed to serve. And Dessus is like, why didn't you tell me? And Spock's like, well, I didn't think I really had, a choice on where we were going. Which doesn't make sense, because, yeah, you did. I don't know if Astra ratted out, all of Corsair. I just thought he, ratted out, this one pirate mission. But don't worry, thanks to the pacing of this book, about here on the page is where they land on Romulus. Here is where Spock gets arrested. Here is where Spock's inquiry begins. And right about here is where Dessus bursts into the courtroom and says that the hearing should be terminated. Dessus apparently has, some role in the military, so he just, stops the entire hearing and decides that he wants Spock to join him in his Romulan military dealings. It doesn't make a ton of sense, but, I mean, we're pretty far into a book that really hasn't made a lot of sense. Do you remember the Tamari? It's been multiple chapters of piracy and prison and nothing to do with the Tamari at all. Anyway, Spock swears his life and death for the Romulan Empire, and he's a sub-commander in the Romulan military now. I don't know how military works, but sub-commander seems kind of high to me, especially since he was just, on death row for stealing Romulan military tech. Dessus and Spock are going to go on, a mission to, examine, a Romulan ship that's been destroyed, but first they stroll through a garden on a pleasant Romulan evening, relaxing as best they could in these few hours before they shipped out. We also learned that Dessus has a sister named Clea. According to the book, Dessus had spoke often of his remarkable sibling, and the Vulcan was looking forward to their introduction. We are of course told this. We have never heard Dessus talk about Clea. We've known him for at least 2 chapters now. We've known him in prison, we've known him on Pirate Planet. There was time, in the prison cafeteria scene that, didn't matter. He could have been like, I have a sister, her name's Clea. You'll probably notice that I talk about her a lot. And then we could have heard him talk about her at least a few more times. But no, we're just told he talks about his sister. Because that's the #1 rule of writing. Always tell, never show. Clea has, I think, 1 line. Yeah, she has 1 line, and her 1 line is also used to, introduce a different character. So we really ultimately know nothing about Clea. But that's okay, because she doesn't matter. There is, a little party, I guess, before they ship off. Clea arrived just before dinner was served. Dessus bowed formally when he introduced her to Spock, who politely acknowledged the introduction. But his primary attention was drawn by her companion. My commanding officer, Clea responded to Spock's apparent curiosity. The shock of recognition, followed by an icy detachment, revealed the woman's emotional turmoil when she recognized Supreme Commander Dessus's new officer. Commander Spock, she said stiffly. Sub-commander, he corrected her. It's the Romulan commander from the Enterprise incident. They meet again. And I guess she's Clea's boss? It's nice to see her, I guess. She's, one of my favorite characters in all of Star Trek. I love the actor's performance for her. I think it's, literally spectacular. That, of course, is not translated, into the book. And you're gonna be so shocked to hear this. Ultimately, the fact that she's here does not matter. But she is wearing a patterned gown with swirls of purple and red, which brought Spock's mind back to the black and white gown she had worn at their last encounter on her flagship. Spock also asks if he can call her by her name, to which she says, I would prefer you to forget I exist. Which sounds like she's single. Do you think she's into much older women? Because I just sort of assume in 200 years, she will not be 200 years old. But I will. Spock is now put on, his Romulan military ship, and he's sort of given boring tasks since he's, pretty low and also was pretty recently, a traitor to the Romulan Empire. But thankfully, Dessus is really interested in learning a little game called chess, which really just solidifies that Dessus is just a replacement for Kirk. They even have them doing the same hobby together. And that chess game is just sort of where the chapter really abruptly ends. So it's just I'm glad I'm playing chess again. I kind of miss playing chess with Kirk, and that's the end of the chapter. Which leads us to the penultimate chapter 9. There are 10 chapters. Only 2 more. We are back On the Enterprise, Kirk has apparently, somewhere during all this time since we've seen them, requested a new engineer. He doesn't like Douglas. That was never, like, really established. We knew he didn't like Leonidas because he was, like, replacing Spock, but I never saw Kirk have problems with Douglas. Like, I wasn't his biggest fan. I thought he was creepy, but apparently he requested, like, a change of personnel for Douglas, and then says, at last, maybe we'll get someone more cheerful. I don't know why cheerful is, like, a necessity for the job of engineer, but it's fine because the change of personnel is Scotty. Scotty's back on the Enterprise. I don't really know what he's been doing this whole time. I guess there are maybe still charges, like, against him, even though he was called not guilty, because he says that his charges were dropped and he was just, like, sent back here to the Enterprise, which is great, I guess. And right as they're having, like, a happy Scotty reunion, Uhura buzzes down to tell them that the Federation ship called the Hood has been destroyed. Hood doesn't really sound like a Federation ship name to me, but, like, yeah, I don't think it really matters. That's all that happens on the Enterprise. We're now back on the Moonhawk. Nope. We're now back on the Moonhawk, which is the name of the Romulan ship that Spock's on. We also learned that a different Romulan ship called the Sun Falcon are under attack. The Moonhawk, like, alters its course to go try to find it, and it's, like, already destroyed by the time they get there. And her entire crew was lost. We learned that Desis's sister Clea was on the Sun Falcon, which I think also means that, like, the Romulan commander from the Enterprise incident was also on the Sun Falcon, since she was Clea's commanding officer. Which really sucks that she died, because I really liked her. The place where the Sun Falcon was destroyed is, like, really close to, like, where the Tamari planet is. And, of course, the place where the Federation ship Hood was destroyed is, like, the exact same area. So the Enterprise and the Moonhawk come across each other, and they both think the other one, like, is the one who destroyed their ship, but Spock convinces Desis to call off the attack that the Romulans are gonna do on the Enterprise. Spock also comes up with, like, a plan on how to, like, starve out, like, the Tamari alien people. Kirk is, like, super hurt seeing that Spock is working for the Romulans, because I don't think they knew that yet. I think last they knew, he escaped prison and then was a pirate, and is now in the Romulan military, which, like, is confusing without context, but also is confusing with context. It really just doesn't make sense. But Spock convinces both the Romulan commander and also the Enterprise crew to, like, meet up for, like, a strategy meeting. And the last time that, like, the Romulans and the Federation and the Klingons got together in this book and tried to, like, strategize together, like, 8 people got kidnapped. So I'm glad this hasn't put a damper on the spirit of congeniality. At this little meeting, Spock reveals that he's figured out that, like, the Tamari keep trying to start wars with people because they have just, like, a too big population, and so to be able to sustain any population, they have to, like, let people die, and the way they decided to do that was through war, which I guess is, like, better than a lot of other options out there. But Spock pretty much wants to, like, put them under siege by putting the Enterprise on one side of, like, the 2 suns that you have to go through to get to the planet, and put the Romulan ship on the other. That way nobody can get in, nobody can get out, and then they will just have to, like, bargain with them to get birth control, is Spock's idea. Which, I love birth control. I love contraception, but I feel like maybe that one could be, like, sent through USPS or something. Their siege, of course, works because, like, the Tamari have, like, really old technology that they didn't even, like, create. They, like, stole it from other people that they, like, fought and conquered. Do you think it's bittersweet when they, like, win one of their conquering efforts, since, like, the whole point is for people to die? Anyway, they don't have strong enough ships or weapons to fight against the Enterprise or the Moonhawk, so they give up pretty easily, and Issa agrees to bargain with them. And Issa shows up wearing the ceremonial dagger that, like, a whole lifetime ago in this book, Spock and Julina used to stab Spock in an attempted suicide. That's just sort of like a surreal experience that I don't know many of us will ever get to be a part of. But I think it's lovely that this little peace meeting warrants, like, ceremonial dagger level of dress. Basically, the Romulans and the Federation just want the Tamari to, like, leave this planet behind. The Romulans decide that they're gonna kick all of the pirates off of Corsair, which isn't too far away. They're just kicking all the pirates off this world, which I get that they're pirates, but I still don't know that's ethical. Like, I don't think they're indigenous to the planet, but it's like nobody else was living there. Like, it's just kind of weird. There's a lot of planets in the world. Surely one of them is habitable and also, like, not inhabited already by a bunch of people. It just seems like a weird solution. Also, like, it's a planet. The pirates are taking up, like, the whole planet. Is there, like, an overpopulation of pirates on this pirate planet? I don't understand why the pirates have to leave at all. But that's what's gonna happen, and they're gonna move all the Tamari from, like, their cold, hostile planet onto Corsair, which I guess is better. Spock asks Kirk for a favor. He asks him to take the Enterprise to a place pretty close to, like, Romulan neutral space so that, like, the Romulan and Federation can continue in their peace talks. Kirk's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. And Spock's like, no, do it. It'll be cool. And then Dessus comes up behind Spock and he's like, what were you talking to your ex about? And Spock's like, nothing. We were just talking. And Dessus is like, I feel like you've betrayed me. Spock did not answer. According to the book, I love relationship drama. I think it should be a key feature in every Star Trek novel. We are finally on Chapter 10, The Neutral Zone, the final chapter. We're almost done with this terrible, terrible, terrible book. Very little happens. The Enterprise goes to the Romulan neutral zone and waits for 3 days straight. Kirk's, like, nervous about it, so McCoy gives him, like, a brandy, but when Kirk's not touching it, McCoy says, try a sip. It'll relax you, Jim. You're more jittery than a room full of anticipating virgins, which is just such a metaphor. They then see that, like, a really small ship is shooting super fast towards them, and it's just sending, like, one message over and over again. It just says, permission to come aboard, over and over. And so, of course, Kirk just lets this weird little ship in, because surely there's no procedures on what to do if, like, a ship you don't know and don't recognize asks to board. Like, I'm positive this is what the Federation would want. In fact, I'm sure it's written in the handbook. Spock is, of course, immediately taken to the brig, but he first warns Kirk that there is a Romulan attack that's imminent because he's been going through, like, Romulan transmissions while he was on the ship, and he figured out that they were going to attack a ship, but it wasn't specified which ship or when, and so he tried to, like, force it by putting the Enterprise, like, in danger's way so that they could subvert it, and so then Romulan, like, wouldn't try that again. Like, I guess it's a plan. Spock's taken to the brig, while Kirk, of course, like, moves as fast as they can from the Romulan neutral zone. But it isn't that fast, because in that fight with the Tamari, I didn't mention, because sort of the whole passage was boring. Like, the whole war with the Tamari was so boring. But the Enterprise was, like, super damaged. So they're moving very slowly away from the Romulan neutral zone. Kirk goes down to the brig to talk to Spock. Spock, Kirk asks gently, what have you been up to? He almost sounded as if he were questioning a recalcitrant child. Up to, Captain? Spock answered, in his most distinguished manner with an eyebrow raised. He relaxed. Jim, what evidence is there that I was up to something? Kirk and McCoy get nowhere in their little conversation with Spock, and so they leave. But as they're, like, in the turbo lift, they hear, like, the ship, like, snapping, which is great. And so that, like, injury to the ship from earlier put too much stress on, like, a different part of the ship, and now they're, like, super stranded. Also, one person died. Also, the things that were damaged were the starboard and port pylons. I don't know what those are. If they want to keep moving, they need to, like, fix something, I guess, or at least jerry-rig it. And so Kirk immediately lets Spock out of the brig, because that went so well last time. And of course, Spock saves the day with his genius brain, or whatever it is he's supposed to have. Finally, after all that is done, Spock comes to sickbay to explain to McCoy and to Kirk what has been happening this whole time. Why was he in jail? Why did he steal a ship? Why was he a pirate? Why was he in the Romulan military? It is simple, Doctor, Spock explained. When the Enterprise was bombed, it was apparent that devious means were the best approach to investigate the attack. It was decided that I be a double agent. From the time I left the starbase with Scott, I have been on special assignment. When I was accused of treason, Starfleet had an opportunity to exploit my status as outcast to root out the pirates on Corsair. What better cover could I have than a convicted traitor sentenced to prison? It was necessary to learn where the pirates were based. Their planet seemed to be in the vicinity of Tamari, and we wanted any lead to resolve that situation. My escape to Minos was planned. Surely you don't suppose it's that easy to escape from a Starfleet maximum security facility. I'm glad we still have supermax prisons in fucking space future. If it were anyone but you escaping, Spock, Kirk interjected, you can get out of anything. That's just so overly congratulatory. I find it so funny. That made the escape all the more plausible, Captain. I'm glad Spock agrees. Desis is not easily deceived. Of course, conditions at the prison helped. I had not intended to form a friendship with them. Even so, I was not completely trusted and had no real freedom of movement on Corsair, or even as Blackfire. I was waiting for my chance to get back to Starfleet when you captured Blackfire. Spock says he hadn't intended to form a friendship with Desis, but that he was supposed to infiltrate the pirates on Corsair. So, was he supposed to, fake a friendship with Desis? And he, was surprised that he actually became friends with him? Or was he just supposed to go from prison to Corsair without Desis? And Desis was just, a coincidence that he was a pirate who, already was, on Corsair? I don't get it, but I also don't think it probably makes sense. His rescue of you wasn't part of the plan then? No, what happened subsequently was completely unforeseen. I had no choice when I was brought to Romulus. Either I joined them or I would be put to death. Joining them gave me a chance to observe their operations. Having the choice between death and entry into their service, I chose to become a Romulan officer. It was then I discovered that Desis was no ordinary pirate. He was a Romulan officer whose mission it was to obtain in detail information on Starfleet's movements and strength. When I found out they were planning to capture a starship, there was still a missing factor. They had not indicated a time for their attack. It was imperative that I remain until the entire plan was available, so that I could notify Starfleet. The successful conclusion of the Tamarian issue was a corollary benefit, of course. Kirk's happy, McCoy calls Spock a son of Satan, and Starfleet Command sends a message that Commander Spock has been cleared of all charges. Explanation to follow. So Spock is officially, once again, a crew member of the USS Enterprise. Our final scene of the book is, of course, Kirk and Spock returning to, the bridge and work, at which point McCoy decides to razz Spock about the poetry written about him, which, to be fair, I feel like he would do. I mean, I'd do it if I knew someone who became a space pirate who became so infamous they had, an entire poetry collection written about them. You know, Spock, McCoy drawled, there's one thing I never did before. He thrust the book at Spock. You can do me a great favor, Spock. I've never asked for a celebrity's autograph before, so here's to new experiences. Would you sign my book of poems, Blackfire? He grinned with fiendish glee. I always knew you were a pirate at heart, Spock. Producing a pen from underneath his tunic, he handed it to him. To belong to his man of fire, if only for a moment, my flaming love. I wouldn't have believed you had it in you. Pretty heady stuff, eh, Captain? He couldn't keep from laughing, and neither could Kirk, who watched Spock lift an eyebrow. Then, with a flourish worthy of Blackfire, Spock removed his iridescent black earring, placing it in McCoy's hand. I'll do better than that, Doctor. A gift from Blackfire. The black jewel gleamed its strange luminescence in McCoy's palm, but it was no match for the gleam in Spock's dark, smiling eyes. And on that haunted note, where we learned that Spock was still wearing the earring while once again aboard the USS Enterprise, Blackfire by Sonni Cooper is done. Part of the reason I wanted to make this video is because every time I describe a book where Spock gets kidnapped, makes 2 suicide attempts, goes to prison, becomes a space pirate, joins the Romulan military, and then has an ending that's, to me, on par with a dream theory, people always say that sounds amazing. And it does sound amazing. It's just terrible to read. I don't think I'll ever find a Star Trek novel quite like this one, and I think I'm glad about that.